I'm Johan Norberg, and I've been studying economic freedom for decades. What is it? And what impact does it have on people's lives? In the last 100 years, the world has created more wealth, reduced poverty more, and increased life expectancy more than in the 10,000 years before. Since the beginning of recorded history until the year 1800, the average person's income barely changed, but in the 200 years since, they increased by 2,000%. How did that happen, and what role did economic freedom play? I'm here in Montreal, Canada, outside the offices of the Fraser Institute, whose work on economic freedom has become the gold standard, used by economists, researchers, and policymakers around the world. The Institute has developed an objective way of measuring the economic freedom of a country, and they've created a report that I've often used myself in my writings and lectures. Great to see you.
Great to see you.
Thank you for Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. What is this report and how does it work?
Well, it's really an effort to view the world through the lens of opportunity and control over one's life. Essentially, institutions and policies influence the opportunities that individuals have in terms of choosing their own occupations, choosing entrepreneurial activities, engaging in trade with people, and perhaps most importantly, the opportunity to keep what they earn. And we thought it would be interesting to see how those changes affect the economic freedom of people.
So the idea was to try to quantify this. So we had to collect data on a lot of countries, data from the World Bank, the IMF, other reputable sources. And then we put it all into the computer. We worked on it for many, many years. Jim had some health problems and lost his eyesight. So that set us back a little bit, but we persevered. And after almost 7 or 8 years, we finally came out with a good report.
You've been using this report to rank countries for the past 17 years. What have you learned from the analysis of the data?
Well, one of the most important things we've learned is that countries that are economically more free grow more rapidly and achieve higher income levels. And in fact, not just a little bit higher income levels, but a lot higher income levels. For example, the per person income of the highest quartile, the highest 1/4 of economically free countries, is 7 times what the figure is for the lowest group. So that's a huge difference.
But it's not just about rising incomes overall, it's also about the poorest of the poor. If we look at that bottom quartile, the poorest 10% of those societies have average incomes of about $1,200 per capita. If we look at the upper quartile, the most free quartile, they have average incomes of over $11,000. Now, that's not a lot to live on, but it's a whole lot more than $1,200.
So as people work their way out of poverty, that's a substantial improvement in their quality of life.
It's not just about the quality of life, it's about the quantity of life. If we look at the most free countries and compare them to the least free countries, the most free countries have substantially higher life expectancies, 18 years.
You know, a lot of that relationship is probably driven by the fact that more free countries have higher incomes, better sanitation, nutrition, things like that. You know, if you live to be 80 versus 60, that's the difference between getting to know your grandkids, see your grandkids grow up, see your great-grandchildren. Economic freedom is sure, it's about income, it's about growth, but it's also about quality of life and knowing your grandkids or not. And if you have more economic freedom, you have a better chance of knowing your grandkids. And that's more important, or as important, as how many cars are in the driveway and things like that.
For over 30 years, the United States was around 3rd place. But in this latest report, the US is at 19. Why? What happened?
Well, the biggest single factor contributing to the U.S. decline is the decline in the legal structure area and protection of property rights. From the wars on drugs and terror to the more widespread use of eminent domain to take property from one party and transfer it to another, to the auto bailout, which tended to undermine the property rights of bondholders.
Well, generally, the Economic Freedom Index is showing a rise of economic freedom around the world, and only a handful of countries are decreasing.
Some people object to economic freedom because they think it's just freedom for the well-off, for the big businesses and for those who already have power. What's your take on that?
I think if you look at the U.S. In response to kind of the financial crisis, what did we get? We got greater concentration in the banking industry. It's harder to be a local bank, local savings and loan. The banking interests and banking lobbyists used the opportunity by the financial crisis to solidify their position in the marketplace. That's not economic freedom. right? That's antithetical to economic freedom.
All those lobbyists that those corporations hire and they send to the national capital, they're not arguing for more economic freedom. They're arguing for less. They're arguing for special privileges.
Oppression of economic freedom, it's kind of subtle, and it goes under the radar, and fewer people notice it. And that's what makes it very difficult to defend.
That's the beautiful thing about this Economic Freedom of the World report. It makes these trends visible. It tells us where to look. It gets us talking about it. And that's why we do this.
That's why you do this. That's why I write about it. That's why we talk about it. Guys, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your work on this.
Thank you. Thank you.
In my years researching this topic, I've seen example after example where people's lives have improved for the better because they had economic freedom. It may be the most powerful force I know for empowering people and creating conditions for poverty reduction and national prosperity.